Hello, welcome to Talks at Brickstone, your one-stop podcast for research, insight, and interviews on thought leadership issues relating to Africa's infrastructure, built and natural environment. I'm your host, Femi Odufalu. In today's episode, we will be discussing on the topic facility management as a risk mitigation strategy in large-scale commercial development. I have with me Mrs. Wale Odufalu, who has handled a wide range of responsibilities in managing organizational affairs, business development in building service industry, and also currently serves as the chairman of the Institute of Workplace and Facility Management. And also she has held a number of positions in business development and regional management with a number of top companies in Nigeria. She currently serves as the Executive Director of Corporate Services of Alphamead Group, one of the foremost facility management group in West Africa. She currently holds an MBA from the Odufalu University, and she's also a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Secretaries. Join me in welcoming Mrs. Wale Odufalu for today's podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Femi.
Okay, on this podcast, we'll basically be talking generally about enlightening developers of why facility management is an important tool, and it's also a good approach to protect the long-term asset life of commercial development. And we'll also look at issues beyond that relating to future of workplace, facility management issues, and much more. I hand you over to Mrs. Wale Odufalu to also just give us a basic intro of, what exactly is this issue of FM and why should large-scale developers, take it seriously, especially in the pre-planning stage of large-scale development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think a good place to start with would be the definition of FM itself. And very recently, we've had a lot of focus in that area with the ISO standards coming into facilities management. Now, we have a universal definition for FM now, which defines FM as the organizational function which integrates people, place, and process within the built environment with the purpose of improving the quality of life of people and the productivity of the core business. So if we take that definition alone and look at some of the critical parts, the first thing is integration. So if if you're talking maintenance alone, for instance, it's rather silo. But FM integrates. It looks at the people, the users of the building, the purpose of the building. Why do we have this building in the first place? What are people meant to do in this building or achieve in this building? Then you look at the place itself. So then you're talking about structure, the equipment, the facilities, and then the process. How do these things work? And that's why FM is typically described as the umbrella organization. Now, let's take the other key parts. It says, with the purpose of improving the quality of life. So even if all of these processes are going on, facilities are working, and it's not resulting in the improved quality of life, then there's a missing point. There's a gap there. And very recently, you found that in the FM industry, every year we have what we call the World FM Day. And the theme for several years up until this year was enabling positive experiences. So it goes beyond just delivering service. We're looking at what is the experience of the beneficiary of that service. It's not just, for instance, is the AC cooling? Are the users deriving the right level of comfort? You're looking at health and safety. So it's a total integration. And then we now look at the productivity of the core business. So it's not enough that people are comfortable and they're safe. How is it enhancing the business? Is the business, the typical saying that the business of business is business. Right. So if I'm not achieving my people, profit, and planet goals, then FM is not helping me in that instance. So when we look at the totality of that definition of FM, and then you take it into planning for your real estate assets, you then see that it goes beyond just putting up a building. And one of the reasons why we have a lack of attention in FM planning when developments are being planned is usually because the accountability for the development team stops at delivering the building. Exactly. So they get paid, they get signed off once the building is up and running. And if you look at the life cycle of a building, so depending on the size of the building, the technology that is used to develop, the availability of funds, that might go anything from maybe 12 to 24 months setting up the building, and then everybody leaves. But the usage of the building, 50 years onward, and the facility manager is there. Now, if the major issue is that if a client is not discerning from the time of giving the brief, he omits the FM. But the FM needs to come in when you're planning the maintainability of the building. So the architect, yes, they do some form of maintainability review, but the FM brings to play the actual experience of maintaining other buildings. He brings to play the concept that it's this equipment is not functioning for the sake of functioning. It's functioning because users are going to be using it to achieve something. And so when the maintainability review is taking place and the FM is present, you can say, oh, look, from experience, I mean, we've had members of the institute sharing experiences like a building goes up and then there are no ducts to service the ACs. Or you have high-rise buildings and then the air conditioners are placed in a manner that every time you have to service them, you have to rent a scaffold. And the cost of renting a scaffold makes it prohibitive. Yeah. So then you start having deferred maintenance instead of coming, say, once a quarter. Then you think about, and who bears the cost? The developer is gone, he's picked up his check and moved on, and the occupiers are there. But if the developer has sold, and it's the occupiers, especially where you have multiple owners. So then you start having issues of, so whose responsibility should this be? And then if you have a situation where the occupiers are not the owners, it becomes even more of a problem because the owner also feels, so I bought from the developer, I've rented out or I've sold out, so why should you be calling me for any bills concerning this? I have no relationship with this building any longer. And that creates problems. So it's being able to see end to end, and it starts from the beginning. And that's what we, in FM, you look at it's dealing with issues from the strategic and long-term perspective that helps us to address that. And of course, on this side of the world, you can't erase the fact that there's not very much emphasis placed on a maintenance culture. So even for several of our public buildings, I mean, putting up buildings, bridges, roads, it's never so much of a problem, for us as a country. But there's no sense of prolonging the life cycle of the assets. And these are things that FM brings to play when developments are being considered. And that's why from the get-go, the facility manager should be part of the building design. Now, on the part of the FM itself, there's a role to play because if you don't sell the value that you bring to the table, then you become invisible to the people who need that value. And by the time you're coming in, sometimes it's too late. You can only manage a situation. If the plumbing has gone all wrong, short of saying you're going to break down all the walls to change the pipes, of course, and no developer is going to, or owner is going to want to incur that cost. So you're left with the problem of having to manage a situation which could have been prevented by you also getting in on board from the get-go. Exactly.
So thank you for this that clarification. But also you find out also that when an investor, so the large-scale investor is investing in an asset, they come and do inspections. Maybe they're buying over a mall from a current developer who is exiting the opportunity, or a hotel or an office building and things. And all these defects that are being found out during inspection sort of like decrease the purchase price because they kind of say, oh wow, this is not working well, we have to fix this, we have to fix that and things. Now, how can FM increase the asset value of large scale development, whereby the asset is already in place, and what should developers kind of like look after and pay attention to preserve that asset value, such that when they want to exit or they want to sell to a new investor, that asset, is being projected in light, in comparison with other great assets, or when it was even built at the beginning.
Thank you very much. Now, for the value of real estate assets, what we're typically talking about is how much the buyer is willing to pay for it at the time you're either disposing of that asset or you want to rent it out or lease the space. And beyond the external factors such as the economy itself, the availability of housing, one critical thing that affects the value of the real estate is the condition of the facility itself. So if you start from even the look and feel of the building, what seemingly soft things that people tend to miss out, even something as seemingly minute as the color of the building, can turn off a user. It doesn't strike me as either a homely place or the right kind of office. And those things go into influencing buyer decision. Now, where FM comes in, again, comes back to the definition of being able to integrate, because FM sees things from what is the user's perspective of this building. If you have a building that's put up, sometimes you have a situation where we have a show of wealth. Right. So everything is blinging and shining, and the tiles are, glossy and all of that. And then the person is wondering, why am I not able to lease out this space? It's because this doesn't strike me as an office environment. It looks more like a palace, for instance. So already the developer is losing value. Then maintaining the building itself, FM, one of the critical things done from a facility management point of view is preventive maintenance. So when you have a situation where things are left to break and then you fix them, those things have an impact on, first of all, how the building is valued, how the building is perceived, and how the building is preserved. So if you, let's take a generator for instance. A generator can keep running, and depending on the size of the engine, the usage and all of that, it can keep running and going on forever. But without preventive maintenance, you get to a point where you have sudden breakdowns. Unfortunately, when they're talking about the cost of FM, one thing that many people always ignore is the hidden cost of service breakdown, the hidden cost of management involvement, and we talked about that in our Nigeria report on the facility management industry. So a lot of people are looking at how much does it cost me to service the generator, for instance. You don't look at the cost. Like someone said, if you think safety is expensive, try an accident. Exactly. What's the cost? So it's the same thing with FM. And in doing that, the asset lasts longer. People are willing to continue to pay premiums, yes, for that. Exactly.
That attracts also the investor.
Exactly.
This have a occupancy.
And the occupancy rates, definitely, because in fact, one of the things we realized in the study that we did was one of the reasons why people don't patronize, outsource FM is because of the bad experiences that they've had. Now, that bad experiences had led them to say, I think I can do it myself. And trying to do it themselves, because you're not taking the total picture to it, so the occupiers then begin to have bad experiences. And you find people moving out of buildings because it's either too expensive to maintain, or in fact, that's a very good example. So sometimes you have a situation where you have, let's use residential. You have 10 units in one building, yes, of apartments, luxury apartments, beautifully built, but the generator there is, say, 1,000 kVA, largely oversized. So I've paid my rent or I've bought the building, and then my service charge bill comes every month, and I have to pay so much for diesel because the generator is far beyond the capacity required. And the generator, once it comes on, it will consume a certain amount of diesel, whether or not you switch on your lights or switch them off, and then you have to pay for common area usage. And then the guy is getting electricity bills and he's saying, you know what, I can't continue to live here. Then he moves. And until the developer or the owner bites the bullet and says, I have to change this generator so that my tenants can have lower cost of usage, that problem is going to keep recurring. And sometimes people don't see that when they're looking at it.
Thank you so much for this. So basically, from the number of things you mentioned, developers really need to pay attention to offering communities of life and asset. Now, moving on, before I get into the issue of linkage which has been occurring between efficiency of the business and its office environment, the number of people I've met, they want to take a job somewhere and they go into an office for interview, and this office is paying more, but from the office environment, you can feel the culture of the organization. But if another job B is paying less, but the office is well maintained, they can perceive the culture of the organization from going to offices in arranged like that. How does this really relate into, I'm not diverting a bit into HR or recruitment and attract the right talent into the organization?
Okay, so one of the things that we must recognize is that we are in a dynamic world and things are changing every day. And research shows that, in a few years, you're going to have over 45%, almost 50% of your workforce being what we now call the millennials. Now, for that generation, if you're going to have, that's a number to reckon with. And for that generation, what is priority to them is the enabling environment to be able to do what we need to do. So if any organization is going to be attracting talent, it means that your building is also part of your value proposition to your employees. The International Special Interest Group of IWFM organized a trip to Netherlands. I think it was 2 years back. And we had, we visited some of the buildings and could see some of the changes that are taking place in the way buildings are being built and managed, taking into consideration the preferences of the workforce. So now you have like the Edge building in the Netherlands, nobody has a specific desk. So I come into the office and I can choose to sit first floor, second floor, because and that's one of the things we looked at in the IWFM report on the workplace. First thing was, what is the workplace? Is it where you go? What is work? Is it where you go? Is it what you do? And that traditional shift from work being the physical space and being defined by the organizational culture is something that HR also needs to take into consideration, because people want to be able to flourish, to be their best at where they do what they do, and all of these things, they impact their productivity. Something as simple as lighting levels. When light level is low, as human beings, it dampens our energy. The smell, the indoor air quality. You come to a place and it's smelling damp, and it's the carpets, the paints, those things affect how you feel, and because it affects how you feel, it's going to affect your productivity at the end of the day. Yeah. And we find that the workforce of the future is more attracted to open spaces where they can feel free. Even now you find in some organizations where people are, your typical whiteboards and things for people writing. Now you just have a glass wall and people can write on the wall, which before was like, how can you write on the wall in the workplace? So rather than trying to correct that behavior, provide a wall that people can write on. Yeah. Now, if you are building and you're not taking these things into consideration, your buildings become unattractive. If you're an employer and you're not taking that into consideration, your workplace becomes unattractive. And then, with the concept of the organizational culture, where we're seeing flatter organizations. And because people are working more in teams, we're talking about agile working, where we say, you know what, let's have a meeting. So it means you need to be taking into consideration, what kind of meeting rooms do I have? It's known all over the world now that your Google and Facebook are creating offices where people can imagine, think, offices that inspire innovation, and those don't happen in your typical four-walled places. They happen, so you're even in locating, for instance, if an organization wanted to get a building, you now start thinking, should we be looking at the seaside? Should we look at somewhere that overlooks, some greenery and all of those things? Even things like the commute, where how long does it take people to get to work? How far away am I from the easiest point of call? In fact, in Netherlands, we had some of the organizations looking at providing parking spaces for electric cars. Yes, so that was a point. So I'm thinking now, all right, so salary, yes, check. Business purpose, yes, check. Role, check. Job description, check. Do you have a place where I can park my car and charge my battery? And that's also part of what people are considering. So it's
fresh.
Exactly, yeah. So and women are becoming, now there's a lot of attention on gender balance and making sure that women are able to get to work freely. So instead of having to first drop your child somewhere and then come to work, so I think, okay, if we provide a workplace, and there are a few organizations in Nigeria who have done that, within the workspace, you have a creche, and the woman is less distracted because she's comfortable knowing that my child is just downstairs and I can attend to them. We can go to work together, come back to work together. That becomes a reason why such a talent can even be retained, because even if they get a more juicy job offer, as it were, you think about the fact that what happens to my child? No, I'm not leaving this organization. And so the employer's value proposition has increased by something that may not have cost you so much more if you think about the comparative cost of losing and rehiring, replacing yourself.
Hope you've enjoyed the podcast so far. Please note that this episode is in two parts, A and B. You've just listened to the first part, and the second part will be available to listen on our website at www.brickstone.africa/podcast. You can just type the title of the episode and you probably find it there. Have a great time.